Okay, so what I did was I compiled a list here of bad and good of traits, and I want to just go through them with you, because you'll realize that really a lot of times it's just kind of turning things around a little bit to get from a bad owner's rep to a good owner's rep. So on the bad side is an owner's rep that manages the project. Now I said that I was a project manager as well, but I really define being a project manager as very different than being an owner's rep. And as owner's rep that tries to manage the project, that's a problem. So what a good owner's rep does is he manages the owner, not the project. You guys are all very competent builders. You're the ones that should be managing the project. Now, if you don't have a project manager and you want the owner's rep to assume that role, some, like myself, can do that, but it's a different role, very different role. Next is when the project manager is combative, right? And that's just a tough thing to deal with. What you really want is you want a project manager that's collaborative, right? Someone that's going to be able to pull all of the different groups of people together. Another quality that is not good in a project manager is an intermediary, like with someone mentioned here about how they stood between the owner and the builder. That should not happen. The owner's rep, a good owner's rep, is not an intermediary, they're a facilitator. So they should facilitate those interactions between the owner, the builder, and the rest of the parties. Bad project managers will actually even incite the owner, like this story about the $5 change orders. It's almost like they're trying to justify their existence. And they feel like by kind of getting the owner excited or anxious about things, they feel like that's going to guarantee their position throughout the job. Instead, what the good owner's rep should do is what we just talked about, educate the owner. Be able to have enough knowledge about construction and about the situation in order to educate the owner about the project. The bad owner's rep is product focused, right? He's focused on schedules and budgets and the house at the end. And that's really not his role. Again, that's really the builder's role. The owner's rep should be process focused, right? He's focused on the entire process of what it's going to take to build the home. You and the architect should have an idea of what it's going to look like at the end, but it's the owner's rep that's got to guide that owner through that process. So that's got to be his focus, is on that process and not on the product. Again, kind of similar to inciting the owner. If the owner's rep is a builder's adversary, if he sees himself as like the traffic cop and he's trying to catch you guys doing something wrong, that's not going to work. What really the owner's rep should be is the builder's ally. And there's, depending on who you're working with, you can actually kind of help to engender that situation. Try to turn that owner's rep from being your adversary to your ally. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to do that. And then, of course, probably the worst thing that an owner's rep can do is to try and be the owner's attorney. I've heard of owner's reps that are attorneys, and then you've got trouble. What the good owner's rep is the owner's therapist. That's really what you want. You need an owner's rep who's an owner's therapist and not an owner's attorney. The next thing is to understand the homeowner's perspective and to realize that the homeowners are very different than what our perspective is. So let's talk about that first off. The first thing is that homeowners really, unless they built a custom home before, it's hard for them to understand that it's just so entirely different than 95% of anything else they're going to buy in their life, right? It's not like they go to a store, buy a custom home, and come home and move into it. So, the first thing is they don't really understand the fact that there's variable pricing, that they can't just go, I've got my set of plans, I don't understand. Why can't I just know what it's going to cost? How come I go out to 3 builders and I get 4 different prices? How can that be? They don't understand that. They also don't realize that they really won't know for sure what they have until it's done. And they don't realize they're part of that reason, right? Because they're invariably going to make changes along the way. But that's a very hard thing for a homeowner to understand, that they're spending all this money, probably more than they have on anything else in their life, and they really don't even know what they're going to have until it's finished. And then the last is it's a lengthy process, right? So it's just in today's world, when you could go on Amazon and get just about anything you want and have it on your doorstep in a couple of days, going through the process of building a custom home is just really, really difficult. So the next thing is, like it or not, there is this misperception in our industry, right, about the mistrust of contractors. And I'm sure all of you guys have great reputations and you've done everything right, but it doesn't matter, right? They've seen the reality TV shows with the rip-off contractors, and no matter what, there's just always this inherent mistrust that they have of contractors. I had a call from a potential client on Saturday, and he just said, I just don't want to deal with a builder. He said, I don't trust them, and I don't think I know what I'm doing, and I want you to go out and do it for me, because I just think they're going to try to rip me off if I don't know what I'm doing. So the last is recognizing that we're dealing with a very valuable possession, right? For most people, this is probably the most valuable possession that they're going to have, the largest investment that they're going to make. But, it's different than a sports car. Can be, for many of our clients, a pretty big investment as well. But, their family doesn't live there. It's not, this is their personal possession. This is where they're going to either raise their family or bring their family and friends. And so it's a very, very personal asset. And so all of those combined together really change the way that a homeowner reacts to the entire process. I'll tell you a situation where I have that right now in Santa Luz. Santa Luz is a new development here in San Diego. And I was hired by, in this case, I was actually referred by the real estate broker. So the real estate broker was working with my client and to purchase this land, showing him a bunch of lots all over. And she could tell from the very beginning that this guy was going to need someone like me, because he was running a company, he was flying to China all the time because that's where his manufacturer was. So even before he closed escrow, she sat him down and said, look, Craig, I think you need an owner's rep, because I'm having a hard time just trying to get you to help buy this lot. I've got a guy that basically can just help you through the whole process. And he can even help you. You should really hire him now before you even close escrow on your lot, because he'll help you put your team together. And so that's what he did. So he hired me, and then the first thing that I did is talk to him about what I call collaborative construction, which is probably many of you guys practice this. If you don't, I think most everyone is going this way, which is the idea is you build your team first, right? I don't believe in going out and hiring an architect, having him draw plans, and then coming back and getting 3 prices from builders, right? That just doesn't work. And it doesn't work for lots of different reasons, because the first thing is the architect is committed to a fixed price. And within that fixed price, they almost guaranteed have not been guaranteed to put together a full set of plans, right? The homeowner doesn't know that. So, and no matter what, no matter as good as the architect is, I've never seen an architect draw a set of plans that's built to a budget. Mainly because the homeowner hasn't established that budget yet, right? So when the homeowner goes and hires the architect, draws up those plans, they get so excited about this amazing house they're going to have, right? And then they go out and they get 3 bids from the builders, and they realize what? They can't afford it. So it's like, it's like going out and test driving a Maserati, right? And just going, this is going to be the best car in the world. And then you find out what the price is, and you realize that you're going to be driving, a Ford instead of a Maserati. So from the very beginning, you're dealing with an owner who's upset, who's disappointed. You haven't even started to build a house yet. They may not even hired you yet, and they've already gotten that. So I go through that whole process. I have a little article I've written called A Better Way to Build, and I talk about all of these. So, and I can, at the end, if you guys are interested, give me your cards and I can send that to you. But, so I educate him from the beginning. So I sat down with Craig. I said, look, this is the way we're gonna go. We're gonna go out, we're gonna find our architect, our builder, our interior designer. We're gonna build this team within, let's say, 2 or 3 months after you close escrow on this lot. So that's what we did. So I have builders that I work with and architects that I work with. He had some that he liked as well. And we just set up interviews. He felt so much better having me at these interviews because I could know the questions to ask, to help him, and then afterwards we talk about it. And so I helped him, and we picked an architect and a builder and an interior designer. And so that's really the best way to work, for me, because I can help build that team from the beginning.
Proposals.
Right.
Builder interviews.
Right. Right. And again, this is why I work on an hourly basis, because I have no vested interest here. And I do as much or as little as the client needs me to do, And I just tell my clients, I say, look, you don't file your own taxes, right? I mean, you don't, if you got sued, you don't represent yourself in a court case, right? You're going to hire an attorney. But why do you think that you're going to know how to build a custom home, And a lot of them will say, well, I didn't know, I thought that that's what the architect and the builder does. And I said, no, you know, they have very specific roles, but they don't do what there's still a big role that you're going to have to play. So why would, you know, there's a professional advisor that you can hire, just like you hire a CPA or an attorney. Why wouldn't you hire someone like that to guide you through the whole process? So, and a lot of times I think it's just that they don't realize that the amount of work that's entailed, or that there's not such a thing as an owner's rep. And that's what I think one of my messages I want to leave you with today as builders is to realize that an owner's rep can be your best friend. And I think you should have, I'm a little biased, but I think you should have an owner's rep on almost all your jobs. And if your owner isn't, you know, thinking that way, I think you recommend it, because believe me, if you get the right owner's rep, they make your job so much easier. Okay, so now let's talk about managing client expectations. We talked a little bit about the homeowner's perspective before, but here's some tips that I use to help the homeowners to understand the home construction process. The first is to realize that their house is a prototype. You got to be careful with this. You got to explain it in the right way. But, you know, their Mercedes went through probably, whatever, I don't know, 500 prototypes, right? Before Mercedes-Benz put that car on the market, they designed it, they test drove it, they redid it again, they redid it again. You're going to build their custom home once. So it's basically a prototype, right? No one has ever built that home. Even if they went and saw another home that you built and they're like, oh, we want this one, it's never the same, right? Every project that you build is unique and different. So it's important for the client to recognize that. And to recognize that unlike Mercedes-Benz, we can't go out and test drive the car, find out that, you know, we had problems with the alternator, and then make the changes. We've got one chance to build this house. And not only do we only have one chance to build the house, you know, we really don't even know what we're building, because we know the plans are going to change. Sometimes the homeowners don't know that or are willing to accept that. But how, I mean, you can't make it any harder than that, you know? That we've got this one chance to build something that we don't even know what we're dealing with, and we don't even know because they're going to change the plans. So by explaining that to the homeowner, they hopefully have a better understanding about what we go through, what you go through as builders in trying to put together their custom home. Another thing that I love to talk about is something called the homeowner's emotional roller coaster. Have any of you read the book called Managing the Emotional Homeowner? It's by a guy named David Lupberger. He's a colleague of mine. He actually coaches with me with the same organization that I work with. So he put this together, and this is in his book. And I love this chart. I pass it out to all my clients, and I utilize it all the time. And I tell my clients, look, this process of building a home is going to be ups and downs. And I can send this to you, by the way, as well. You can take a picture if you want. David's okay with that. But I can send it to you as well. And they kind of get it at the beginning, but they have to be reminded of it all the time and to realize that the process is different. So like my Santa Luz guy, you know, we've just finished framing, and he's like on, you know, cloud nine, because he can finally see his house after, you know, this is 2 years now. He bought his lot 2 years ago. So he's over the moon because we're right here. We're right here at framing. We just set the windows. So he's like, oh, God, I love the house, and it's coming together. It's looking so great. So I sent him this last week, and I said, now, Brian, I just want to warn you, we're about ready to start the downward spiral, you know? It looks like we got a lot done in these last 2.5 months, but this next month and a half, 2 months, it's going to be terrible. Because first off, we're going to spend weeks roughing everything in. You're going to keep showing up at the job site. You're going to go, there's nothing happening. What's going on here? You know, they don't understand it. I said, then we'll start putting drywall on, and you'll start to kind of see some, although you really already see the walls. But then we're going to have to sand it. We're going to have to, you know, I said, so by the time we get done, you're going to be just thinking that we're not getting anywhere. And that'll be, you know, sometime into November, probably right around Christmas time. I said, but then at that point, then we'll start with your trims, you know, and finishes, and then it'll start, you know, coming up, and things will start looking better. So, but I love this chart. It works so well to really help manage that client's expectations. So another thing with managing client expectations is construction schedules. So I love to say that the minute that you print a construction schedule, it's out of date. The minute you print it, it's out of date. And what I do as an owner's rep, a little something that I'll do at my introductory meetings, kind of freaks out the builders sometimes, is you probably at your presentation, you give your package and you have your budget and you have your schedule, right? And so what the homeowners, so they do right, they look right to the bottom line, the budget, and then they flip forward on the schedule and they see when they're going to be in their house. So what I do is I say, okay, well, you know, that's great. You've got them moving in on November 15th. And then in front of the builder, I'll turn to the client and I'll say, I'll bet you any amount of money you're not going to be in your house on November 15th. And they look at me like, what? You know, and they look at the builder and the builder's like, and I said, you know, it might be before, it might be after, but it's not going to be November 15th. There's just way too many changes and things that are going to happen along the way. And, you know, I think we've hired the right builder. He's going to do everything he can to get you in, but you just can't imagine everything that's going to happen between now and then. And right away, it just shatters that expectation. You know, if you tell them November 15th, they're already planning Thanksgiving dinner in their new house, right? And this way, it shatters that expectation so you don't have to deal with that, and that they understand that it's a dynamic process. So that's what I love about a cloud-based schedule, is that it's always changing. I don't print schedules out anymore. I just sign my clients to Buildertrend. And every time they get on it, it's different, because I'm updating the schedule like weekly. And they start to realize that. And they go, oh, okay, well, a schedule is a dynamic living being. It changes all the time. When are we going to be moving in this week, you know? And it just changes. It's part of the process. Okay, so what is the most important thing that you need from your client to build their home? So obviously you need plans, but that's not the most important thing. Obviously you need finish selections, but that's not the most important thing. You need funds. They've got to be able to pay for the house. What's the most important thing that you need from your client? There it is. Who said it? Trust. Yep, it's trust. That's the most important thing. That's the most important thing for me as an owner's rep, and that's the most important thing for you as a builder, is to build that trust with your clients. So how do you build that trust? Well, there's lots of different ways, but one of the things that I find that's really effective is the 4 agreements. So most of you are familiar with the 4 agreements, Don Miguel Ruiz. A great book. It's like 120 pages. If you haven't read it, you should read it. It's a great, great book. And basically what Don Miguel Ruiz says is there's 4 things that if you operate from this standpoint, not only will you build trust, but you'll also just eliminate so much of the drama that occurs in not only in working with our clients, but just in general. So the first is be impeccable with your word, you know. Do what you say what you do. Just be impeccable with your word. If you make a mistake, own it. You know, we talked about accountability. And yes, it does with a cloud-based system. You know, it's quite easy to see when someone's dropping the ball. None of us are perfect. It's a lot better for you to be straight up with your clients if you make a mistake than to try to cover it up. The second is don't take anything personally. You know, just don't realize that, you know, like, for example, at hiring an owner's rep, we're going to talk more about that in a minute. You know, if the client hires an owner's rep, don't think that's because they don't trust you. The third is don't make assumptions, which is kind of along the same lines. When your client reacts in a certain way, call them up and talk about it. Don't assume that the worst. Don't assume that they've got bad intentions in this case. And the last is always do your best. Notice it says always do your best. And your best is different at different times. In different circumstances, you can't build as well as you can under other circumstances. So your best is always changing. So you need to be compassionate with yourself as well and recognizing that your best is different along the way. A little Zen aspects to that. Let's talk about some of the owner's rep fallacies that I have heard along the way and what we can do to try to address those. So the first is that homeowners hire an owner's rep when they don't trust their contractor. Sometimes that's the case, but that's not always the case. And I'm hoping that by the end of this presentation, you'll realize that the great role that an owner's rep plays. And again, I'm biased, but you'll see in that article that I wrote, which is A Better Way to Build, is that there's a team, and an owner's rep is part of that team. If you're building a team, you're taking a team approach, you need a great builder, a creative architect, a good interior designer, and an owner's rep. That's your team. You know, you start with those 4, you put those 4 together, and you go forward from there. The second is that if the builder and the architect are doing their job, there's no need for an owner's rep. So again, remember that there's a difference between project management and owner's rep. I've done both. On that big job, I really ended up being the project manager because the builder didn't realize we started doing a smart house and a whole bunch of other stuff, and he just didn't have the staffing. So I was the project manager, but I also was the owner's rep. But in this case, if all of you guys, I'm sure you all have project managers, probably most of the architects you work with, that doesn't mean that you don't need an owner's rep. Your project managers are handling what you're doing, right? Your project manager works for you. They're focused on making sure that that job gets done right, gets done on budget and on time. That architect project manager, he's looking at the architect's plans, making sure that they're right and accurate. Who's the owner's project manager? Who's the one making sure that the owner knows what's going on and is really going to get what he wants? That's not the job of the builder's project manager. That's not the job of the architect's project manager. That's the job of the owner's project manager or the owner's rep. So there again, an owner's rep plays the same role as a project manager. That's just not the case. They don't serve in the same role. Owner's reps are not needed on most jobs, only when a homeowner is out of town or unavailable. Again, not true. I would say half of my clients fit that profile, but half don't. And the half that don't are oftentimes those difficult clients that we talked about, engineers, attorneys, doctors, people that need a higher level of degree of comfort and involved in the process. Okay, an effective owner's rep has to visit the construction site regularly. We talked about that earlier. Not the case. Not the case. If there's a great superintendent and really good project managers and a great communication between the team, that owner's rep does not need to visit the site often. The Orange County job that I did, I visited it twice. Once at the beginning and three times during a 6-month process. But I had we had the co-construct, I had photos, I still had weekly meetings with the owners. They would just FaceTime me. And they'd show me the house and, So there are ways you can do that without being on site. Okay, so let's talk about an owner's rep and why hire an owner's rep. Well, let's start with the fact of why is your client building a custom home in the first place? Right? They could probably go out and find a house that's probably pretty close to what they want, unless they've found this lot and they've fallen in love with this. But to a certain extent, they want to go through this process. They may not realize what the process is, but they want to go through the process of building a home. So that's where you got to come from, is realize that they want to go through that. So you've got to be able to satisfy them through that process and to focus again on that process. And that's where the owner's rep comes in, by being able to help with that. So let's talk about some of the benefits of having an owner's rep. So the first is greater efficiencies. There's now, if you have the right kind of owner's rep that knows how to communicate effectively and efficiently, you now have a new level of communication between you, the client, all of the subs, everything. So that's going to add an element of greater efficiencies to the project. The second is that there's now cost savings because you have a more informed owner, right? They now have a professional advisor that's going to help them make the right kinds of decisions so that they can be cost effective. Again, the builder, you can tell them that, but you have a different relationship with them. And there's a certain amount that's if I explain it to them versus you, even though you could probably do a better job of explaining it, they're going to understand it better from me because they see me differently than they do you. The next is that it saves time. This is really what I tell my clients. So again, this is why I bill, one of the reasons why I bill on an hourly basis is because I don't want to be seen as, I used to bill as a percentage. And the problem with that is that when a homeowner comes to me and says, well, should I do A or B? And I tell them B, and B is more expensive, they go, well, sure, because you're getting X percent of that. So if I'm on an hourly basis, there's no conflict of interest there. But the other thing is that, especially if I'm working for business clients, and especially if they're an attorney that works, they go, look, I can pay Ed X dollars an hour, and I'm billing at 3 times that amount. So for every hour that I'm paying Ed that I don't have to spend, I'm making money on him. So it's a great way for them to be able to understand that and how I can actually save them time by leveraging that. Now here is, I think, the most important thing. It reduces their stress. They now have a hired, trusted professional that's going to guide them through this whole process. They can relax, they can sleep at night, they can know that this is getting done the right way. So all of our clients are affluent clients, right? They all have done very well for themselves. That's why they're able to build these custom homes. And so it's important for us to understand that their pyramid, their value pyramid here. Money for them is not really the most valuable thing for them, right? They've made a lot of money. They're confident they can make more if they need to. So yes, they don't want to spend more money than they need to, but that's not the most important thing for them. Time is definitely more important than money, right? No matter how much money they have, they can't buy more than 24 hours in a day. So that's really important for them as well. But the most important thing, I think, especially for affluent people who can afford conveniences and have a comfortable life, is stress. Because, you know, you can spend some money to help reduce your stress, but when it really gets down to it, you know, there's certain things that you just, all the money in the world can't eliminate the stress. And so much of that comes about in building a home. It's what we talked about earlier, whether it's the husband and wife or whatever. And so if you can find a way to help them reduce their stress level, that's so invaluable for them. That's just the greatest savings that you can offer them. And that's what I can do as an owner's rep. Okay, so how do we deal with a bad owner's rep? So we talked a little bit about bad owner's reps. So the first thing I think is your attitude. You know, you have to, the best thing to do is try to get a good owner's rep. But if you don't have a good owner's rep, then you've got to just feel that you've got to kind of accept that owner's rep to a certain extent. So the first thing is communicate more, not less. Don't try and do an end run around the owner's rep. Don't try to go directly to the owner. That's not going to work for you. Now, I'm not saying don't communicate with the owner. See, this is the great thing about emails, is that you can still communicate with the owner's rep and just CC the owner. So I'm not saying that's going around them, right? That's bringing the owners, and that's what you needed to do in this case, right? Because your owner's rep was not communicating with your owner. So, I mean, I do that with husbands and wives sometimes, where, you know, the wife will send me something, and I know the husband is the budget guy. When I reply, I just CC the husband. Whoops, I'm sorry. You know me, I'm all about communication. I'm sorry I CC'd your husband, but, you know, that's just the way it is. I'm just kind of keeping things going. And I've had difficult conversations. I've had pissed off wives say, why did you copy him? He didn't need to see that. And I said, you know what, I'm sorry. But, you know, the fact is that I know this process, and it's going to affect the budget. He needs to know. So I'd be happy to talk to him about it, whatever. But you just got to communicate more. When you have that owner's rep that's trying to be that traffic cop between you and the owner, you got to communicate more. Second is practice those 4 agreements. You know, don't take things personally. You know, do your best. Be impeccable with your word. And do that with the owner's rep, and do that with the owners as well. The next is ask for help. You know, go to the owner's rep and actually try to ask him for help. Say, you know, hey, I'm having a hard time with this, or I need, you know, some help with this. How do you think is the best way to approach it? Get him to be on your side. You know, get him from being your adversary to your ally. And the next one is, you know, just again what I talked about earlier, is you're changing your attitude. Just don't resist it. You know, it's kind of like, you know, you've got a great wife, but she's got a really difficult sister, you know, and it's like that sister-in-law that you love your wife, but the sister-in-law comes with it, right? So you know, you find a way to deal with your sister-in-law, and you know, and you make it work. And sometimes that's what you got to do if you've got a bad owner's rep. And then the last thing is just guide them from bad to good. So, you know, again, we go back to this, and when they're over here, just try to move them over to here. And it's not always going to work, but at least now you kind of know what the difference is. You know, you might have thought he was doing his job to manage the project. And now you know that he really should be managing the owner and not managing the project. And it's going to take more than one conversation. You can't just say, look, John, you know, I'm here to manage the project, not you. He's not going to get that if he's on that side already. But you can talk to him about it, right? And you could say, hey, you know what? If, you know, that's kind of my stuff. If I can do this, I can maybe take a little bit off of you. If you could, how you really could help is if you could go to the homeowner and you could kind of help explain this, or help us get these last finish selections done so I can keep us on budget. Okay, so how do you avoid getting a bad owner's rep on a project? I kind of said this earlier. Call you. Well, call me. But no, it's be proactive. It's recommend an owner's rep yourself. And really recognize, especially if you're going to have a difficult client, recognize and just explain to them. Like I said, most of my clients, the hardest thing for me is for them to understand what I do. They just don't even know that there's such a thing as an owner's rep. You ask, 9 out of 10 people, I want to build a custom home, what do I need? Oh, I need a builder, I need an architect, I need an interior designer. Okay, great. What about an owner's rep? Owner's rep, what's that? Never heard of it. They just don't know. It's the same thing we talked about earlier. There's not an international or a national owner's rep association. We're kind of the best kept secret in the custom home building industry. So, I came from the commercial side, and the commercial side, it's very common to have an owner's rep, right? But not on the residential side. And the other thing about building homes is it goes back to David Luperger's book. There's this huge emotional aspect that we have to deal with that you don't deal with in the commercial side. Believe me, in my 10 years on commercial side, I did not have owners calling me freaked out because the carpet went in and it was the wrong color. That just doesn't happen. So there is this whole emotional component that you as a custom home builders have to deal with. And that's what the owner's rep does for you. It manages that emotional component that you unfortunately have to deal with. What are the benefits to a builder of having an owner's rep? So this is what we were just talking about, You're going to get your answers faster because first off, me as an owner's rep or any owner's rep, if they're a good one, they're available, right? They're never more than a phone call away. And just like I was saying about that framing example, right? I know enough about construction to be able to give you the answers that you need to be able to keep things moving along. So just being able to have an owner that can make those decisions that's more readily available is a great thing. So the second is that it lets you focus on the product, right? That's what you as a builder is. You're focused on quality, budget, schedule. So let the owner's rep focus on the process with the client. The next is that I can help the homeowner to understand your perspective. We talked about that before. It's very, very different if it's a change order or a fee renegotiation. It's going to come about very differently if it's explained by an owner's rep than if it's explained by the builder. And the next is to mediate conflicts and to provide resolution before it turns into an expensive legal situation. Right? Our affluent clients, I've worked for them where they have an attorney on staff, right? You're never going to win a legal battle with those kinds of clients. So you want to do whatever you can to avoid getting into court with them. And that's by having that owner's rep, having that mediator, that person to help mediate in between is going to save you from that. But the biggest benefit, I think, to a builder of having an owner's rep is what I said earlier. It shields you from the emotional aspects of the homeowner. And that is so key. And that's something that I think we just don't recognize what a big factor that is. That's why I love that book about managing the emotional homeowner. David Luperger wrote an entire book on this thing. It's amazing how much emotions come into play in building a custom home. So again, the builder manages the project, the owner's rep manages the homeowner. It's just kind of like the architect, right? The architect is responsible, I would think for the most part, the architect usually, in most of your jobs, they're responsible for the entitlement and the permitting process. Everyone knows that, right? The architect handles that. So it's just like that. So it's the owner's rep is responsible for managing the emotional process with the owner. And it's just like if there's an entitlement process comes up, you pick up the phone, you call your architect, say, hey, you know what, the inspector just has an issue with this. Can you figure out what's going on and get that figured out for us? What's the same thing? When the owner calls you or you get that email from the owner, who you don't call anyone right now unless you have the right kind of owner's rep, you figure that's got to fall on you, and it really doesn't. It's just kind of the same way that you use an architect for the entitlement process. You can use an owner's rep in that way. And again, that's what happens. Without an owner's rep, the owner has those emotional issues. You can't eliminate them. So, what would you prefer? Would you rather have the homeowner call you on a Saturday with their issues, or would you rather have them call the owner's rep? So I think we've kind of talked about this before, but why is the owner's rep better suited to deal with the emotional homeowner? As I said, I have a different relationship with the homeowner, right? They see me as a trusted advisor, as an objective observer, as a professional consultant. It's just different, very different than no matter how great of a trusting relationship they have with you as a builder. They're just not going to deal with you in the same way. Another great thing, again, goes back to this compensation structure. You know, they are going to sometimes abuse you because you're free, right? You're not charging them by the hour. So when they've got a question, they'll call you up and talk your ear off for a half an hour, even if it's on a Saturday. And that's the other thing I would do too, as I didn't talk about this here. I think you have to set expectations with your clients. Some of you may be fine, like me, getting emails on Saturdays or text messages on evenings. You don't have to be like that to be a successful builder. And if that doesn't fit with your relationship in your personal situations, you need to tell your clients that from the beginning. You can tell them, and if they still want to send you the email on Saturday, you just don't reply until Monday. And you'll start to tell them what's going on with that. But again, as an owner's rep, then that's where I can come in. And the thing with me, though, they know they're paying me, $250 a minute. So, they're not going to spend a lot of time to just talk about things, right? Because they know it's like an attorney, right? When you call an attorney, you have your facts, you know what you need, and you know that the meter's running. So it's the same way with me. They don't abuse my time because they know that they're paying for every minute that they're with me. And that's very different than when they call and talk to you as a builder. So next is that I'm also, like I said, a more effective mediator because I've seen both sides. I've worked with lots of builders. I've worked with lots of homeowners. And I think just given in my temperament as well, I can be very unbiased and objective.